Listen, when the power grid collapses and the temperature outside drops to -30, you're not going to be Googling survival hacks on your dead phone. You're going to be sitting in your apartment, watching your breath fog in front of your face, realizing that every YouTube prepper video you half watched is completely useless because they all assumed you'd have propane or a generator or a wood stove, or literally anything except what you actually have. 4 walls, some furniture, and maybe a brick you found in your building's basement. Day 1, the flash blinds you through your window, turning the sky white for a split second that burns into your retinas. Day 3, the ash starts falling, thick and gray, blotting out the sun like someone draped a funeral shroud over the world. Day 5, your heater coughs once, twice, then goes silent forever, and the cold seeps in like an uninvited guest who has no intention of leaving. And here you are, shivering, desperate, wondering how the hell a species that put people on the moon is now struggling to stay warm in a concrete box. But what if I told you a common object, something so ordinary you've probably stepped over it without a second thought, could turn the tide, without gas, electricity, or any fancy gear? Here's the truth nobody wants to admit until it's too late. The difference between freezing to death in your own living room and making it through the night might come down to understanding one simple fact about physics that your high school teacher definitely mentioned, but you definitely weren't paying attention to. A brick can save your life. Not as a weapon, not as a doorstop, but as a heating element that works when everything else has failed. And before you laugh this off as some primitive nonsense, understand that thermal mass has kept humans alive for thousands of years, and it'll work just as well during a nuclear winter as it did in medieval castles. The question isn't whether it works. The question is whether you know how to use it without burning down what's left of civilization or poisoning yourself with carbon monoxide in the process. Let's start with why you're actually in this nightmare scenario, because understanding the timeline makes the solutions make sense. Nuclear winter doesn't announce itself with sirens and evacuation orders. It creeps in after the flash, after the initial chaos, when the millions of tons of debris and ash kicked into the stratosphere start blocking out the sun. Temperatures drop, not over months, but over days. The grid goes down because nobody's manning the power plant anymore, or because the electromagnetic pulse fried the infrastructure, or because society just stopped functioning in any recognizable way. Your radiators go cold, your electric heater becomes a useless hunk of metal and plastic, your natural gas line stops flowing because the pumping stations aren't operational, and suddenly you're facing a very simple biological reality. The human body maintains a core temperature of around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and when that number starts dropping, you've got maybe a few hours before hypothermia begins shutting down your organs one by one. Your fingers go numb first, blood retreating from your extremities to protect your core. Then the shivering starts, violent and uncontrollable, your muscles burning precious calories to generate heat. If it keeps dropping, confusion sets in, your brain starved of warmth, making decisions that will kill you while thinking they'll save you. Your apartment without heat will equalize with the outside temperature within a day or two, depending on insulation. You're looking at an indoor environment that could easily hit freezing or below. This is not a camping trip. This is not a romantic return to simpler times. This is a pure survival equation, and you need heat. Now here's where most people make their first fatal mistake, and it's a mistake you need to sear into your brain so you never ever make it. They start burning things indoors without understanding combustion chemistry. Imagine this: you burn that old wooden chair in a metal trash can, feeling the warmth spread through your freezing apartment for the first time in days. The relief is overwhelming. You settle down near it, finally comfortable, finally hopeful. You doze off thinking you've solved the problem, and you simply never wake up. Why? Because that cozy fire, starving for oxygen in your sealed apartment, is producing carbon monoxide, colorless, odorless, and absolutely lethal. Your body mistakes it for oxygen, binds it to your hemoglobin tighter than actual oxygen ever could, and your cells start suffocating from the inside out while you drift into what feels like the most peaceful sleep of your life. This is how people die in disasters, not from the disaster itself, but from improvised solutions that seem perfectly logical in the moment. They light candles first, sure, and maybe that gives them some psychological comfort, but a candle produces maybe 80 watts of heat, roughly equivalent to a human body just sitting there, essentially useless. So they get desperate. They burn books, furniture, whatever's flammable. Some try wet wood they found outside, which creates choking smoke that fills the apartment, irritating lungs already stressed from cold and anxiety. Curious how to spot incomplete combustion before it's too late? The signs are subtle but deadly. Yellow or orange flames instead of blue, soot buildup on walls, a headache that won't quit. By the time you notice, you might already be too impaired to save yourself. Stick around, because what I'm about to show you solves the carbon monoxide problem entirely by separating combustion from your living space. So the brick method, as crude as it sounds, is actually brilliant physics applied to desperate circumstances. Here's how it works, and more importantly, why it works when every modern solution has failed you. You need a heat source that's outside your sealed environment, ideally a small fire on a balcony, in a courtyard, or even outside a window if you can manage it safely. You place your brick, or multiple bricks if you have them, directly into this fire or on a grill grate above the flames. The brick itself becomes your heating element, your portable radiator, your lifeline. Think of the brick like a battery charging in fire. The dense clay soaks up heat like a sponge drinks water, storing thermal energy in its crystalline structure, the same structure that was created when it was fired at over 2,000 degrees in a kiln. And this is where the physics gets interesting. Bricks have a specific heat capacity lower than water, yes, but here's what actually matters for survival. They're dense and solid, which means they store a massive amount of total heat energy due to their mass. When you heat a standard brick to several hundred degrees Fahrenheit and then bring it inside, wrapped carefully in aluminum foil and placed in a metal container or ceramic surface, it becomes a radiant heater that will slowly leak out that stored energy over several hours. The key word there is slowly. A brick doesn't give you intense heat like a flame dancing in front of your face. It gives you steady, diffuse warmth that creeps into your bones. Think of it as the difference between a space heater that blazes for 10 minutes then dies and a heated blanket that keeps you comfortable all night. The brick radiates infrared energy, the same kind of heat you feel from the sun warming your face on a winter day. And this radiation warms objects and surfaces around it, including your body, without needing air to carry it. But here's the practical reality. Picture this, you're on your balcony, hands protected by the thickest gloves you could find, feeding small pieces of broken furniture to flames that lick around your brick for 45 minutes. How do you know it's ready? When it starts to glow faintly orange in the darker areas, like dying embers in a campfire. That's your signal. The brick has absorbed enough heat to be useful. Now comes the dangerous part, transport. You cannot, under any circumstances, pick this up with kitchen mitts. You cannot use your hands at all unless you have actual welder's gloves or similarly heavy-duty protection that can withstand 400 to 500 degrees.
What you need is a system, and you need to practice this with a cold brick first, because when you're dealing with something that can give you third-degree burns on contact, you don't want to be figuring out your technique in real time while your hands are shaking from cold and adrenaline. Two metal poles or pieces of rebar can act as tongs if you cross them like chopsticks. A metal bucket with a wire handle works if you lower the brick in carefully. A cast iron pan with a long handle can cradle a brick if you slide it underneath. What if you drop it? Here's the backup method, using wire coat hangers. Bend two of them into hooks, link them through holes drilled in advance through old bricks during prep time, creating a carrying harness. Whatever method you choose, test it, refine it, make it second nature. Once you've transported the brick inside, and this is absolutely critical, you need multiple barriers between it and anything flammable. Start with a ceramic tile on the floor, then a metal baking sheet, then the brick wrapped in aluminum foil to contain heat and reflect infrared radiation. Never place it directly on wood floors, plastic, or fabric. Never. One moment of carelessness and your survival shelter becomes an inferno. The aluminum foil serves multiple purposes that aren't immediately obvious, but could mean the difference between 6 hours of warmth and 3. First, it reflects some of the infrared radiation, which helps distribute heat more evenly rather than creating one intense hotspot directly above the brick. This means you can sleep closer to it without risking burns. Second, it creates a protective barrier that prevents direct skin contact if you accidentally brush against it in the dark when you stumble to the bathroom at 3 in the morning. Third, it makes the brick easier to handle when it's time to move it or replace it with a fresh one, because you can grab the foil edges once the brick has cooled to a few hundred degrees. Still hot, but manageable with thick gloves and quick movements. Some survival experts recommend wrapping the brick in several layers of foil, creating an air gap between each layer. Why? Physics of trapped air pockets. That air acts like bubble wrap for warmth, insulating the brick and slowing its heat release even further. Tests show this extends useful warmth by 2 to 3 hours. This gives you more sustained warmth over a longer period, rather than intense heat that fades quickly, which is critical because interrupting sleep every 3 hours to rotate bricks will exhaust you faster than the cold will kill you. Now let's address the question that's probably screaming in your head. What happens when you run out of fuel to heat your bricks? This method is not infinite. It depends on combustible material, and in an extended collapse scenario, that becomes a finite, precious resource that depletes faster than you think. This is where you need to think in terms of hierarchy and efficiency, of rationing not just food, but heat sources. The brick method is for acute survival, for getting through the coldest nights when your body temperature is dropping into the danger zone and you're 1 degree away from losing consciousness. During the day, even in nuclear winter conditions, there's usually slightly more ambient warmth, especially if you can capture whatever pathetic sunlight penetrates the ash clouds. This is when you need to implement passive heating strategies that don't require fuel. Seal off the smallest room in your apartment, ideally one without external walls if possible. Turn your bathroom into a survival pod. Use blankets, plastic sheeting, old coats, anything you can find to block drafts and create a microclimate. Seal vents with duct tape, line walls with layers of clothing. The smaller the space, the easier it is to heat with your own body warmth alone. A closet can become a cocoon where your own metabolic heat is enough to prevent lethal cold. Curious if this beats a brick? It doesn't. It's complementary. You're essentially creating a human-sized insulated chamber where your body heat, about 75 to 100 watts when at rest, actually makes a difference. Your body produces heat constantly through metabolism, through the chemical reactions that keep you alive. In an unheated apartment that's below freezing, this isn't enough. But in a sealed, insulated space of just a few cubic meters, your breath alone can raise temperatures by 10 degrees. The carbon dioxide you exhale, the moisture from your lungs, it all contributes to a microenvironment that's survivable. This is why homeless populations survive winter in cardboard structures that seem impossibly inadequate to those of us who've never had to test them. It's not the structure providing warmth, it's the structure containing the warmth the body produces and blocking the wind that would strip it away like a thief. Layer cardboard against the walls. Use newspapers as insulation. The air trapped between sheets is what actually insulates, not the paper itself. Your goal is to trap a layer of warm air around your body and prevent convective heat loss, the silent killer that steals your warmth without you even feeling it move. But here's the reality that separates short-term survival from long-term endurance. And this is where most people's plans fall apart even if they survive the first week. You can't stay curled up in an insulated pod indefinitely. You need to move, to find food and water, to maintain your physical condition so your muscles don't atrophy. And movement in cold environments burns calories at an accelerated rate that will shock you if you've never experienced true cold stress. This is the vicious cycle of winter survival that kills people who understand cold but don't understand biology. You need calories to produce body heat. You need body heat to survive. But in a collapse scenario, calories are scarce, and every action you take, every trip to find water, every rotation of bricks, every shiver depletes your reserves. A sedentary adult needs around 2,000 calories per day in normal conditions. In cold stress, that number can climb to 3,000 or more. If you're not eating enough, your body starts burning muscle tissue for energy through a process called catabolism, which reduces your capacity to generate heat, which makes you colder, which requires more energy. It's a death spiral. People don't freeze to death just from cold exposure, they freeze because they ran out of biological fuel. This is where the heated brick becomes part of a larger strategy rather than a standalone solution. When you have one warming your survival space, you use it to create a recovery period where you can strip off your damp clothing, dry it near the brick's radiant heat, and let your body recover from constant cold stress.
Moisture is one of your worst enemies in winter survival, worse than the cold itself in some ways. Sweat from exertion, condensation from breathing in your sealed pod, even humidity in the air, all of it soaks into your clothing and dramatically increases heat loss. Water conducts heat away from your body 25 times faster than air. This is why hypothermia can kill you at 50 degrees Fahrenheit if you're wet, a temperature that seems mild until your soaked clothes turn you into an ice sculpture. The brick's radiant heat can dry your layers in a way that body heat alone cannot, and this seemingly simple act of maintaining dry insulation might literally be the difference between making it and becoming another frozen corpse discovered when the spring thaw finally comes. Now let's talk about scaling this up, because one brick is survival, but multiple bricks are strategy, a system that turns desperation into something approaching control. If you can secure 4 to 6 bricks and establish a rotation system, you can maintain continuous warmth. While 2 bricks are cooling in your sealed room providing life-saving heat, you're outside heating the next 2 in the fire. This requires discipline and routine that sounds manageable when you're reading it in comfort, but becomes a Herculean task when you're actually executing it. Every 4 hours you rotate. Set an alarm if your phone still has battery. Mark time by counting heartbeats if it doesn't. Imagine the wind howling outside, your last fuel piece barely enough to maintain the fire, and you're standing there in the dark having to make a choice. Do you risk the rotation knowing the fuel might not last, or do you gamble on body heat alone and hope you wake up in the morning? That's the choice that breaks most people. Not the cold itself, but the moment when you have to decide between 2 terrible options and live with the consequences. This is where the psychological element of survival intersects with the physical in ways that survival manuals never quite capture. You have to override your brain's desperate desire to stay warm and static. You have to maintain the routine even when you're exhausted, even when it feels pointless, even when the voice in your head whispers that skipping just 1 rotation won't matter. For those with access to more resources, or for those thinking ahead before everything goes to hell, there are improvements to the basic brick method that increase efficiency dramatically. If you have access to metal containers, particularly old ammunition cans or similar sealed metal boxes, you can create a brick heater that's safer to transport and holds heat longer. Place the heated brick inside the metal container, seal it, and the metal acts as both a protective barrier and a secondary heat radiator. The air gap between the brick and the metal slows heat transfer through a principle called thermal resistance, extending the useful life of your heat source. Some preppers have experimented with sand-filled metal containers with bricks buried in the center, creating thermal batteries that can stay warm for 12 hours or more. The sand acts as additional thermal mass and insulates the brick, slowing the release of energy to a trickle that lasts and lasts. Another variation involves water, though this requires careful consideration and a secure water supply. A brick heated to high temperature can be placed in a metal container of water, never glass, it will shatter, which will rapidly heat the water to boiling. Be warned, the steam can burn you worse than the brick itself. Here's a safe dunk method. Use a pot with a lid, lower the foil-wrapped brick in slowly using tongs while standing back, then immediately cover to contain the explosive steam. This gives you hot water for drinking, for creating a warm compress to treat frostbite in its early stages, or for filling bottles that can act as bed warmers. A sealed water bottle filled with hot water and wrapped in a sock can be placed in a sleeping bag and will radiate warmth for hours. This is actually more efficient than heating the brick alone, because water has a much higher specific heat capacity than brick. It holds more energy per gram. The brick becomes a heat transfer medium rather than the heat source itself. However, this method requires a secure water supply, which in a nuclear winter scenario might be compromised by radioactive fallout or infrastructure collapse. Speaking of contamination, and this is critical if you're actually in a post-nuclear scenario rather than just a conventional grid collapse, if you're burning materials outdoors to heat your bricks, you need to be hyper-vigilant about what you're burning and what's falling into your fire from the sky. Plastics release dioxins and other compounds that will poison you slowly. Treated wood, anything with paint or chemical coatings, releases toxic fumes that you'll be exposed to during the heating process, breathing them in as you tend your fire. Stick to untreated wood, paper, cardboard, natural materials. But here's the invisible killer: fallout ash. In a nuclear winter scenario, any ash or particulate from the atmosphere should be treated as potentially contaminated with radioactive isotopes. Curious about radiation signs to watch for? Yellowish dust is a bad sign, means abort, find a different location, don't burn anything that's touched it. Your outdoor heating area needs to be covered or shielded to prevent direct contamination of your heat source, which you're then bringing into your living space wrapped in foil and held close to your body. The mental challenge of implementing any of this during an actual collapse cannot be overstated, and honestly, this might be harder than the physical survival itself. In a true nuclear winter scenario, you're not just dealing with cold that numbs your fingers. You're dealing with the psychological weight of knowing that the world as you knew it has ended, that everyone you couldn't reach might be dead, that rescue probably isn't coming. You're dealing with the absence of information. No internet, no news, no way to know if conditions will improve or if you're simply delaying the inevitable in a world that's already over. The constant low-level terror that comes from not knowing if you'll see spring, if crops will ever grow again, if there's any point in surviving at all. That night when you're bone-tired, when the fire is sputtering and you need to go out into the howling wind to find more fuel, when every fiber of your being screams to just stay curled up and let it end. Pushing through that moment builds something in you that didn't exist before. Why does this matter? Because it turns dread into purpose. The heated brick method, as practical as it is, also serves a psychological function that might save your sanity as much as your body. It gives you a routine, a task, a sense of agency in a situation that otherwise strips you of control. Tending the fire, rotating the bricks, maintaining your heat source, these actions are meditative. They keep your mind occupied with immediate, solvable problems, rather than spiraling into existential dread that ends with you walking outside without a coat and not coming back. But let's be brutally honest about the limitations, because false hope kills people just as dead as cold does. This method assumes you have access to combustible material, which in an urban environment might run out faster than you think. You'll burn through your furniture in a week, your books in 3 days if you're running 2 fires. Any wood you could scavenge from the building, baseboards, door frames, whatever isn't structural, maybe adds another week. And then what? This is why the brick method is part of a transition strategy, not an endpoint. It buys you time to assess whether staying in your apartment is viable long-term, or whether you need to make the dangerous decision to relocate to a better insulated structure, to combine resources with neighbors, or to move toward a location where sustainable heating is possible. Community becomes critical in extended survival scenarios in ways that rugged individualism never quite admits. With neighbors, one person tends fire while others rest. You pool your bricks for a communal heater that's bigger and more efficient than individual efforts. You rotate watch duty so everyone gets actual sleep instead of paranoid naps. But what if betrayal hits? What if someone decides your stash of fuel is better served warming them than you? Build trust routines early. Share information before resources. Prove value through knowledge before you're vulnerable. Group survival is a dance of cooperation and suspicion, and you need to be good at both. For those thinking ahead, before the grid goes down and the stores are looted and the streets become too dangerous to navigate, there are preparations that make the brick method vastly more effective and safer. Stockpiling fire starters is foundational. Waterproof matches and sealed bags, ferrocerium rods that work when wet, maybe a magnifying glass for solar ignition on the rare clear day. A single lighter can be the difference between successfully implementing this method and freezing while trying to start a fire with sticks and cursing your ancestors for not teaching you bushcraft. Securing actual fire bricks, which are designed to withstand repeated heating cycles without cracking, is ideal. You can find them at hardware stores, sometimes at fireplace supply shops.
Standard construction bricks can develop microfractures over time with repeated thermal stress from heating and cooling cycles, and eventually they'll crumble into useless chunks. Fire bricks last longer, heat more evenly, and are worth the investment. Having heavy-duty gloves, welding gloves are perfect, metal tongs, and transport containers ready to go means you're not improvising critical safety equipment during an emergency while your fingers are numb and your judgment is impaired. Map out ventilated fire locations, balconies, courtyards, alley alcoves.
Run a practice rotation on a cold night just to feel how exhausting it is. Insulation materials are equally critical and often overlooked. Reflective emergency blankets, often called space blankets, are cheap, lightweight, and can be used to create radiant barriers on walls and windows. They reflect heat back into your living space rather than letting it escape through walls and glass. A single roll of these blankets, combined with the brick heating method, can create a surprisingly warm microenvironment in an otherwise freezing apartment. Foam board insulation, if you can acquire it pre-collapse and store it flat, can be cut to fit windows and block massive heat loss through glass, which is one of the least insulating materials in a typical apartment. Windows are thermal hemorrhages. Cover them. There's also the question of hygiene and health management in prolonged cold, and this is where the brick's utility extends beyond just not freezing to death. When you're using heated bricks to stay alive, you're probably not showering. You're probably not washing clothes regularly. You're in survival mode, which means bacterial growth, skin infections from constant dampness, and respiratory issues from stale air become serious threats that could kill you as surely as hypothermia. The radiant heat from a brick can be used strategically to dry clothing that's been hand-washed with minimal water, maybe snow melted and boiled to kill pathogens, preventing the buildup of bacteria and the smell that comes with wearing the same clothes for weeks. Use brick heat to sterilize water. Boil it in a pot placed near the brick, killing bacteria that would give you diarrhea, that dehydrates you, that weakens you, that kills you. It can be used to warm water for a sponge bath, which isn't luxury, it's health maintenance. Skin breakdown from constant cold and moisture leads to infections that your compromised, malnourished immune system can't fight effectively. A small infection becomes sepsis. Sepsis becomes death. Nutrition intersects with heating in ways that become critical for long-term survival. Your body generates heat through digestion and metabolism. Eating before sleep, particularly foods high in fat and protein, gives your body fuel to burn through the night, literally. Fat contains 9 calories per gram compared to 4 for carbs and protein, and it burns slow and steady, providing sustained energy for heat production. Traditional Arctic survival rations were often 70% fat by calories for exactly this reason. If you have access to canned foods, nuts, or cooking oils, prioritize consuming fats in the evening before settling in with your heated bricks. A spoonful of peanut butter before bed amps your internal heat through thermogenic digestion, ramping your metabolism for hours. You're combining external heat from the brick with internal heat generation, creating thermal synergy that keeps your core temperature stable. Hydration is catastrophically neglected in cold survival. You don't feel thirsty like you do in heat, but your body loses moisture constantly through respiration, visible in your foggy breath, especially in dry, cold air. Dehydration reduces blood volume, which impairs circulation to your extremities, increasing frostbite risk dramatically. If you're heating bricks, use that capability to warm water. Warm water is easier for your body to process than ice-cold water, which costs precious calories to heat internally before absorption. A cup of warm water before sleep, another when you wake, maintains hydration without metabolic penalty. Let's address the elephant in the room that could kill you without warning. What happens when the brick cracks, or worse, explodes? If there's moisture trapped inside the brick's porous structure, and there often is if you've scavenged bricks from outside where they've been rained on or snowed on, and you heat it rapidly, that moisture turns to steam, builds pressure, and the brick can fracture violently, sending superheated shards flying. This is why you always start with dry bricks and heat them gradually. If you're pulling bricks from outdoor locations, they might be saturated deep inside. These need slow drying over several days in a relatively warm environment before high heat exposure. A cracked brick isn't just useless, it's dangerous. Shards of ceramic at 500 degrees cause third-degree burns and lacerations that won't heal without antibiotics you don't have. Prevention: slow heat cycle. Start with low flames for 10 minutes, gradually building heat. If you hear popping or cracking sounds while heating, remove the brick immediately using tongs and let it cool completely. Don't use it. Mark it as failed so you don't accidentally try again later when exhausted and not thinking clearly. The reality of nuclear winter is that it's not a temporary event you can wait out. Projections vary, but we're talking months to years of significantly reduced temperatures and sunlight. Crops fail, supply chains collapse, the thin veneer of civilization peels away. The brick method gets you through weeks, maybe 2 months if you're extremely disciplined, resourceful, and lucky. Beyond that, you need a fundamentally different approach. This might mean migrating to a structure with a functional fireplace, risking travel through a collapsed world. It might mean joining a community that's pooled resources to maintain a single heated space, trading labor or knowledge for a spot near the fire. It might mean accepting that survival in your current location isn't viable and making the difficult decision to move despite the dangers. For those with technical skills and materials access, brick heating principles can be scaled up into something approaching sustainability. If you have a large quantity of bricks and construction ability, you can build a rocket mass heater or masonry heater. Both use thermal mass of bricks to store heat from a small, efficient fire and radiate it over extended periods. These aren't quick projects. They require knowledge, materials, time, and location commitment. But in sustained collapse where you're committed long-term, they represent a solution that doesn't rely on constant fuel input like regular fires. A properly designed masonry heater can be fired for an hour using minimal wood and provide warmth for an entire day. The principle is identical to your single brick, just scaled massively. DIY blueprints exist. Stack bricks in a coil pattern with a firebox at one end, creating a long flue path that extracts every bit of heat from smoke before it exits. The bricks soak up that heat and radiate it for 24 hours. But what if bricks fail entirely? What if you can't source them, can't heat them safely, can't make it work? The next evolution awaits. Thermal mass using stones, water-filled containers, even packed earth. Adaptation is survival. There's a certain dark humor in the fact that humanity spent thousands of years developing these technologies, from heated stones in medieval beds to bed warmers filled with coals to elaborate castle heating systems, only to forget them entirely in the age of central heating and electricity. We've become dependent on systems we don't understand, can't repair, and take completely for granted until the moment they fail. And when those systems fail, we're left rediscovering methods that our ancestors considered basic knowledge, the kind of thing a peasant in 1425 knew without thinking. The heated brick isn't some exotic survival hack discovered by modern preppers. It's literally what people did before infrastructure existed. It worked then, and it works now, because the physics haven't changed. Heat is heat. Thermal mass is thermal mass. A brick heated to 500 degrees contains the same amount of energy whether you're living in 1425 or 2025, whether you're in a stone cottage or concrete apartment. As you implement this, as you're rotating your bricks and tending your fire and managing your microclimate and fighting every instinct that screams to give up, remember that survival is cumulative. It's not one brilliant solution that saves you. It's 100 small, correct decisions made consistently over time, each one building on the last. The brick keeps you warm enough to sleep without hypothermia. Sleep keeps your immune system functional. A functional immune system prevents you from getting sick. Not getting sick preserves your caloric reserves. Preserved calories give you the energy to find more fuel. More fuel allows you to continue heating bricks. Continue the cycle long enough and you might just make it to spring. Break any link in that chain, fail at any step, and the entire system collapses like dominoes falling. This is why routine matters. This is why discipline matters, even when it feels impossible. This is why you can't give up on the night when rotating the bricks feels like climbing Everest because you're so tired and cold and hopeless that even breathing feels like too much effort. That's the night that tests whether you survive or become another statistic, another frozen body found when someone finally comes to check the buildings. And here's the final truth that nobody wants to acknowledge, because it strips away the comforting illusion that preparation equals survival. Not everyone makes it. The brick method, like any survival technique, increases your odds, shifts the probability slightly in your favor, but it doesn't guarantee anything. Someone with the best supplies and knowledge and training can still die from bad luck, from an accident, from a medical condition they can't treat without modern medicine. Someone with almost nothing can survive through a combination of resourcefulness, stubbornness, spite, and sheer random chance. What you can control is your preparation before the collapse, your knowledge when it happens, and your willingness to do what's necessary when every option is terrible. The brick is simple. almost absurdly simple. A chunk of fired clay heated in fire and brought inside to radiate warmth. But simple doesn't mean easy, and it definitely doesn't mean guaranteed. It means you have a method, a starting point, a tool in your survival arsenal. In a world where the temperature is dropping and the lights are out and civilization has temporarily misplaced itself, a fighting chance is more than most people will have. And sometimes, just sometimes, when you combine that chance with knowledge and discipline and the stubborn refusal to lie down and die, it's enough. Not always, not for everyone, but sometimes. And in a nuclear winter, sometimes is the best odds you're going to get.